Smoke drifted through the corridors of the wandering star like a dying breath. The old freighter had seen better days, but today might be its last. 3 Calathi warships surrounded it like wolves circling wounded prey, their weapons locked and ready. Inside the freighter, Daniel Reed finished sealing a crack in the oxygen line with tape and spit. He was 34 years old, with gray streaks in his brown hair that had not been there 2 years ago. His hands were rough from work, and his eyes carried the tired look of a man who had seen too much but refused to stop moving. The communication screen crackled to life. A reptilian face appeared, scales the color of dried blood, eyes like yellow fire. The Calathi officer spoke in broken human language. "Human vessel, you are in Dominion space. Prepare for boarding. Resistance means death." Daniel wiped grease from his fingers and looked at the screen. "I am in neutral space. Check your maps." The Calathi hissed. "Dominion space extends where Dominion ships fly. Prepare for boarding." The connection cut. Daniel sighed and looked at the cargo hold behind him. Medical supplies, antibiotics, surgical equipment, food supplements for children, all of it meant for Haven Colony, a small world that the Calathi had been slowly starving through blockade for 8 months. He could dump the cargo, surrender, maybe they would let him live. Daniel thought about the children on Haven. He thought about their thin faces and hollow eyes in the last transmission he received. He thought about what kind of man he wanted to be. He sat down in the pilot chair and waited. The boarding was quick and efficient. Calathi soldiers moved through his ship like insects, their armor clicking against the metal floors. They were tall creatures, nearly 7 feet, with 4 arms and tails that ended in bony spikes. Their society was built on conquest. For 300 years, they had expanded across the stars, taking what they wanted and destroying what they could not use. Daniel did not move from his chair as they surrounded him. He counted 12 soldiers plus the officer from the screen, not the commander yet. This was just the first wave. "Stand human," the officer ordered. Daniel stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I want to speak to your commander." The officer laughed, a wet clicking sound. "You do not make demands." "I am not making demands. I am making a request. Tell Commander Zorvan that Daniel Reed wishes to speak with him." The laughter stopped. The officer's yellow eyes narrowed. "How do you know the commander's name?" "I know many things. Tell him." The officer studied Daniel for a long moment. Then he spoke into his communicator in the Calathi language, too fast for Daniel to follow. There was a pause. A response came back. The officer's scales seemed to pale slightly. "The commander will see you aboard the flagship. Move." They marched Daniel through the docking tube and onto the Calathi warship. The air was hotter here, thick with a smell like burning copper. Calathi crew members stopped to stare at the human prisoner. Some made gestures that Daniel recognized as insults. Others simply watched with cold curiosity. The commander's chamber was at the heart of the ship. The doors were decorated with skulls from 17 different species, trophies of conquest. Daniel noted that there were no human skulls among them. Commander Zorvan sat on a raised platform, his scales darker than his soldiers, almost black. He was older than the others, his movements slower but more deliberate. Battle scars crossed his face and chest. His 4 arms rested on the arms of his command chair, claws tapping against the metal. "Daniel Reed," Zorvan said. His human language was better than his officers, almost perfect. "I know this name." "I hoped you would." Zorvan leaned forward. "Meridian 4. You are the human who killed 200 of my soldiers with mining equipment and collapsed tunnels." 187, Daniel corrected. "I counted." Silence filled the chamber. The soldiers around Daniel tensed, waiting for the order to kill. Zorvan's eyes burned into Daniel's face, searching for fear. He found none. "You are either very brave or very stupid," Zorvan said. "I have been called both, usually by the same people." Zorvan made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your cargo, medical supplies for the rebel colony Haven, you know we will not allow this." I know you have orders to prevent it. And yet you came anyway? Why? Daniel met the commander's gaze. Because children are dying, because your blockade is not war, it is murder, because someone had to try. Zorvan stood. He was even larger than Daniel had estimated, nearly 8 feet tall. He walked down from his platform until he stood directly in front of Daniel. Close enough that Daniel could smell the copper and smoke scent of Calathi breath. I could kill you now, Zorvan said quietly. I could tear you apart with my own claws. Your reputation would not save you. Daniel did not step back. You could, but you will not. You are certain of this? I am. Why? Daniel smiled, a small and tired smile. Because if you were going to kill me, you would have done it already. You brought me here because you are curious. You want to know why I am not afraid. Zorvan stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to his command chair. Escort the human to a holding cell. No harm comes to him until I say otherwise. He looked at Daniel one more time. We will speak again, Daniel Reed, and you will tell me about Meridian 4, all of it. The soldiers grabbed Daniel's arms and led him away. As he left the chamber, he heard Zorvan's voice behind him, speaking to his officers in Calathi. Daniel did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. The commander was afraid. 3 years before the Wandering Star was captured, Daniel Reed had never held a weapon in his life. He was a supply coordinator on Meridian 4, a mining colony at the edge of human space. His job was counting crates and scheduling deliveries. The most dangerous thing he faced each day was paperwork. Then the Calathi came. The first warning was a flash of light in the night sky. Daniel was walking home from the supply depot when he saw it. A ship entering atmosphere, then another, then a dozen more. They descended like falling stars, beautiful and terrible. Within an hour, the colony's communication tower was destroyed. Within 2 hours, Calathi ground forces landed outside the main settlement. The colony had no military, no defenses, only 3,000 civilians, mostly miners and their families. The colony administrator called an emergency meeting. People were screaming, children were crying, someone suggested surrender. Another person argued they should fight. Daniel stood in the back of the room, thinking. He knew the mines better than anyone. He had spent 2 years mapping every tunnel, every shaft, every storage chamber. He knew where the rock was weak. He knew where water collected. He knew where the emergency supplies were hidden. He raised his hand. I have an idea, he said. The plan was simple. Get everyone underground, seal the main entrances, send a distress signal and pray that help arrived before the Calathi broke through. But Daniel knew the Calathi would not wait. They would dig, they would blast, they would find a way in, so the plan needed a second part. Someone had to slow them down. Daniel volunteered before anyone could stop him. He was not married, he had no children, and he knew the tunnels better than anyone alive. The first Calathi squad entered the mines 6 hours after the evacuation began. Daniel was waiting for them in Tunnel 7 behind a stack of ore crates. He watched them move through the darkness, their scales reflecting the dim emergency lights. They were confident, careless. They expected no resistance. Daniel pulled the lever. 3 tons of rock fell from the ceiling, burying the squad. Daniel did not stay to count the bodies. He was already running to the next position. For 11 days, Daniel fought a war of shadows. He collapsed tunnels. He flooded corridors with water from the underground reservoir. He rigged mining charges to explode when doors opened. He set fires that filled passages with smoke. He moved through the darkness like a ghost, striking and vanishing before the Calathi could respond. The Calathi brought more soldiers. Daniel killed them. They brought engineers to clear the rubble. Daniel killed them too. They brought tracking animals bred to hunt by scent. Daniel led them into a chamber filled with chemical fumes that burned their sensitive noses. On the 5th day, the Calathi commander sent a message through the tunnel speakers. Surrender, and they would let the civilians live. Continue fighting, and everyone would die. Daniel found the speaker system, and sent his own message back. "Come and get me." The Calathi commander was not used to being challenged. He sent 50 soldiers into the tunnels with orders to bring Daniel back alive for public execution. 12 came out, none of them had Daniel. By the 8th day, the Calathi soldiers refused to enter the mines. Their commanders threatened them with execution for cowardice. The soldiers said they would rather die by Calathi hands than face the demon in the darkness. They started calling Daniel a name in their own language. Daniel later learned it translated roughly as the ghost who eats soldiers. On the 11th day, human relief forces arrived. 3 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and engaged the Calathi fleet. In orbit, the ground forces retreated to their landing craft, desperate to escape before they were cut off. Daniel emerged from the mines as the last Calathi ship fled the atmosphere. He was covered in dirt and blood. His left arm was broken. He had not eaten in 3 days, but he was alive. All 3,000 colonists were alive. The human military wanted to give Daniel a medal. They wanted to make him a hero, parade him in front of cameras, use his story to inspire others. Daniel refused. He asked only for a ship and enough supplies to reach the next colony. The officer in charge asked why he would refuse such honors. Daniel looked at his hands. They were still shaking. "I killed 187 people," he said. "There is nothing honorable about that." He took his ship and left. He became a supply runner, delivering cargo to colonies that needed help. He never spoke about Meridian 4 unless someone asked directly, and when they asked, he told them the truth. He was not a hero. He was just a man who did what he had to do. But the story spread anyway. Among humans, Daniel Reed became a legend, a symbol that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when pushed to the limit. Among the Calathi, he became something else, a warning, a name spoken in whispers, a reminder that humans were not the soft, weak creatures they appeared to be. The Calathi High Command added Daniel Reed to a special list. They called it the Registry of Untouchable Prey. It contained the names of individuals who should never be engaged without overwhelming force. Daniel's name was at the top. And now, 3 years later, Commander Zorvan sat in his quarters aboard the flagship, reading Daniel's file for the 3rd time. The reports from Meridian 4, the casualty lists, the psychological evaluations of soldiers who survived. Zorvan had conquered 12 worlds. He had killed thousands. He had never felt fear. Until now. He closed the file and stared at the wall. The human in his holding cell had not flinched, not once. Zorvan needed to know why. The holding cell was small and hot. The Calathi preferred temperatures that made humans sweat, and Daniel's shirt was soaked through within the first hour. He sat on the metal bench and waited. There was nothing else to do. He thought about the cargo sitting in his ship, the medicine that children needed, the surgical supplies that could save lives. Every hour he spent in this cell was an hour that someone on Haven might be dying. But Daniel had learned patience in the tunnels of Meridian 4. He could wait. The cell door opened on the 2nd day. Commander Zorvan entered alone without guards or weapons. He carried 2 containers in his lower hands. The door closed behind him. Daniel watched as the commander sat on the floor across from him. It was a strange sight. Calathi commanders did not sit with prisoners. They stood over them. They dominated. Zorvan placed 1 container in front of Daniel. Water, clean, not poisoned. Daniel did not move to take it. Zorvan made a sound that might have been amusement. "If I wanted you dead, you would be dead. Drink." Daniel picked up the container and drank. The water was cold and tasted slightly metallic, but it was water. His throat had been dry for hours. Zorvan drank from his own container. For a moment they sat in silence. "Tell me about Meridian 4, Zorvan said. "You have the reports." "Reports tell me what happened. They do not tell me why." Zorvan leaned forward. "You were a supply clerk. You had no training, no weapons. You were alone against an army, and you won." "I did not win. I survived." You killed 187 of my soldiers. I remember every one of them. Zorvan's eyes narrowed. You say this like it troubles you. Daniel met his gaze. It does. Why, they were enemies, they would have killed you. That does not make it easier. Daniel set down the water container. I was not born to be a killer. I was born to count boxes and fill out forms. Every life I took, I felt it. I still feel it. Zorvan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. Calathi are taught that killing is natural. We are predators. Our ancestors hunted. Our empire was built on conquest. We do not mourn our enemies. And yet you are here, Daniel said, asking me questions instead of killing me. Zorvan's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of emotion that Daniel had learned to recognize. I have read your file many times. I do not understand you. You refuse to beg. You refuse to threaten. You show no fear. This is not normal. What is normal? Prisoners beg for mercy, or they curse and spit and promise revenge. They are afraid or they are angry. You are neither. Daniel thought about the question. He thought about his 11 days in the darkness. He thought about the faces of the people he had killed. I was afraid, he admitted. At the beginning, I was so afraid I could barely breathe, but fear does not help. It clouds your thinking. It makes you weak. So I put the fear away. I focused on what needed to be done. And now, are you afraid now? No. Why not? I could kill you with one hand. Daniel smiled slightly. Yes, you could, but you will not. You keep saying this. Explain. Daniel leaned back against the cell wall. I have been studying the Calathi for 3 years. I wanted to understand you. I read your history, your culture, your military records, and I learned something interesting. What? The Calathi expansion has stopped. You have not conquered a new world in 8 years. Your fleet is stretched thin. Your soldiers are tired. Your people are starting to ask questions about why they are fighting. Zorvan's claws tightened on his water container. You know much about our internal affairs. I know that you have a mate named Sorrel. I know that you have 3 children. I know that your eldest, a son, is studying military engineering at the Imperial Academy. I know that you send credits home every month to pay for his education. Zorvan went very still. How do you know these things? Because I looked, because I wanted to understand who you are, not just what you are. Daniel met the commander's eyes. You are not a monster, Zorvan. You are a father. You are a mate. You are a soldier following orders because that is what you were taught to do. And what would you have me do instead? I would have you ask yourself a question. Why are you here? Why are you blockading a colony of farmers and children? Why are you starving innocent people? Orders. Orders from who? For what purpose? Zorvan was silent. Your empire is dying, Daniel said quietly. Not from war, from exhaustion. You have conquered so many worlds that you cannot hold them. You have killed so many enemies that there is no one left to trade with. You are alone in a galaxy that hates you. And you think I do not know this? I think you know it very well. I think that is why you are sitting here talking to a prisoner instead of killing him. You are looking for another way. Zorvan stood suddenly. His scales had gone dark, almost black. His breath was coming fast. You do not know me, he said. You do not know what I have done, the worlds I have burned, the species I have broken. You are right, Daniel said. I do not know everything you have done, but I know what you could do. I know who you could become. Zorvan stared at him. Then, without another word, he turned and left the cell. Daniel sat alone in the heat and silence. He had planted a seed. Now he could only wait and see if it would grow. For 3 days, Zorvan did not return to the holding cell. Daniel spent the time sleeping, exercising in the small space, and thinking. The guards brought him food twice a day. It was Calathi rations, designed for reptilian digestion, but Daniel forced himself to eat. He needed his strength. On the 4th day, the cell door opened again. Zorvan stood in the doorway, but this time he did not enter. Come with me, he said. Daniel followed the commander through the ship's corridors. Calathi soldiers stepped aside as they passed, their eyes following Daniel with a mixture of hatred and fear. Word had spread about who he was. The ghost of Meridian 4 was aboard their ship. Zorvan led Daniel to a private observation deck. The room was empty except for 2 chairs facing a wide window. Through the glass, Daniel could see the stars and the distant glow of a planet. "That is Haven," Zorvan said, "the colony you were trying to reach." Daniel looked at the planet. It was small and brown with patches of green near the equator. Not a wealthy world, not a strategic world, just a place where people lived and worked and raised families. "How many people are there?" Daniel asked. 12,000, mostly farmers, some miners, a few technicians. "And how many have died since the blockade began?" Zorvan did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was flat. 317, mostly children and elderly, malnutrition, treatable diseases, lack of medicine. 317 people who did nothing wrong, who just wanted to live. They defied the Dominion. They refused to pay tribute to an empire that had never helped them, that had never protected them, that only took and gave nothing back. Zorvan turned to face Daniel. "You speak as if you understand our empire." "I understand empires. Humans have built many of them. They all fail eventually. They fail because they forget that power is not the same as strength." "Explain." Daniel sat in one of the chairs. After a moment, Zorvan sat in the other. "Power is the ability to force others to do what you want," Daniel said. "Strength is the ability to make them want to do it. Power requires constant force, constant threats, constant fear. It is exhausting, it is expensive, and eventually there is always someone who is not afraid. Someone like you. Someone like me, or like the colonists on Haven, or like the millions of people across your 17 conquered worlds who hate you and are waiting for the moment to strike back." Zorvan's claws scraped against the arm of his chair. "You think we do not know this? We know there will be rebellions. We prepare for them. And when you crush one rebellion, 2 more spring up. When you burn one world, 3 others start hiding weapons. You cannot win this war because it is not a war. It is a tide, and you cannot fight the tide. Then what would you have us do? Release our conquered worlds, abandon our empire?" "I would have you consider a different path." Daniel reached into his pocket. Zorvan tensed, but Daniel only pulled out a small data chip. "This contains information about every human colony in the outer regions, trade routes, resources, population centers. It also contains a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "The humans and the Calathi have been enemies for 30 years. We have fought wars, we have killed each other, but we have also learned about each other. We know your strengths, you know ours." Daniel held up the chip. "This proposal suggests a trade agreement, medical supplies and agricultural technology in exchange for mineral rights on uninhabited worlds. No conquest, no blockades, no death." Zorvan stared at the chip. "This would never be approved by High Command." "Probably not, but it might be approved by the commanders on the front lines, the ones who are tired of fighting, the ones who want to see their families again, the ones who are starting to wonder if there is another way." "You want me to defy my superiors?" "I want you to choose. You can follow orders and continue the blockade. More children will die, more hatred will grow. Eventually there will be a war that neither side can win. Or you can let me go. Let my cargo reach Haven, start a conversation that might lead somewhere better." Zorvan was silent for a long time. He stared at the planet through the window, his yellow eyes unreadable. "My eldest son," he said finally, "his name is Korath. He is brilliant. He could have been a scientist, an engineer. Instead, he studies how to kill more efficiently, because that is what our empire requires of its children. It does not have to be that way." "No, it does not." Zorvan stood and walked to the window. He placed one clawed hand against the glass. "I have burned worlds, Daniel Reed. I have killed without mercy. I have done terrible things in the name of the Dominion." "I know. And yet you offer me this." He turned to face Daniel. Why, after everything we have done to your people, why would you offer peace? Daniel stood and walked to stand beside the commander. Together, they looked at the small brown planet and its 12,000 innocent souls. Because hatred is easy, Daniel said. Understanding is hard, and building something new is harder still, but it is the only thing worth doing. Zorvan took the data chip from Daniel's hand. He held it for a moment, then placed it in a pouch on his belt. Return the human to his cell, he said to the guard outside the door, and bring me the communication codes for Haven Colony. Daniel allowed himself a small smile as the guards led him away. The seed was starting to grow. The message from High Command arrived on the 6th day. Daniel heard the commotion from his cell, shouting in Calathi, running footsteps, the hum of weapons being charged. When Zorvan appeared at his cell door, Daniel knew something had changed. The commander's scales had gone pale, almost gray. His movements were stiff. What happened? Daniel asked. High Command received word of your capture. They have sent orders. Zorvan's voice was flat, empty. You are to be executed publicly. The execution will be broadcast across all 17 systems as a warning to others who defy the Dominion. Daniel stood slowly. When? Tomorrow, midday, in the ship's central chamber. I see. Zorvan stepped into the cell. The door closed behind him. For a moment, the two stood in silence. I considered letting you go, Zorvan said quietly. Last night, I had the paperwork ready, a report saying you escaped, that your ship's engines were damaged and you fled into an asteroid field. What stopped you? High Command sent a second message. They know I have been speaking with you. They are watching me now. If I release you, my family will suffer. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand. You understand? Zorvan's voice cracked. I am going to kill you tomorrow. I am going to cut your throat in front of cameras while billions watch. And you understand? Yes, because you are not doing it by choice. You are doing it because you have no other option. There is always a choice. Is there, if you let me go, they will kill your mate, they will kill your children, they will make examples of everyone you love. Daniel met Zorvan's eyes. I would not ask that of you. Zorvan turned away. His shoulders shook slightly. Daniel realized with surprise that the commander was struggling to control his emotions. In 300 years of conquest, Zorvan said, no prisoner has ever shown me mercy. They curse, they beg, they threaten, but you stand there and tell me you understand. Because I do. Why, I am your enemy. I am going to kill you. You are not my enemy. You are a person trapped in a system that does not allow for kindness, a system that punishes mercy, a system that has taught you that the only way to survive is to be cruel. Zorvan turned back to face him. And what would you have me do? Sacrifice my family for a stranger? No, I would have you do exactly what you are going to do. Execute me, follow orders, protect your family. Daniel paused. But after it is done, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that another path exists. And someday, when you have the chance to make a different choice, I want you to take it. You think I will have that chance? I think the universe has a way of presenting opportunities. The question is whether we are brave enough to take them. The door opened. A Calathi officer stood in the corridor. Commander, the execution chamber is being prepared. High Command wants confirmation of the broadcast schedule. Zorvan straightened. His scales shifted back to their normal dark color. His voice became cold and commanding once more. Inform High Command that the execution will proceed as ordered. Have the prisoner cleaned and brought to the chamber at midday tomorrow. The officer saluted and left. Zorvan looked at Daniel one last time. There was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Pain and something else, something that looked almost like hope. I will remember, he said. I will remember everything. Then he was gone. Daniel sat down on his bench and closed his eyes. He thought about Haven Colony, about the children who needed medicine, about the cargo sitting uselessly in his ship. He thought about his life, the quiet years before Meridian 4, the dark days in the tunnels, the long months of traveling between stars trying to help where he could. He had done some good, he had saved some lives, he had planted some seeds. Perhaps that was enough. The night passed slowly. Daniel did not sleep. He watched the stars through the small window of his cell and thought about all the worlds out there. All the people living their lives, unaware that a man in a metal box was waiting to die. He thought about Zorvan, about the commander's family, about the son studying at the academy. He thought about what it meant to change the universe. Sometimes you changed it with grand gestures, with battles and victories and moments of glory. But sometimes you changed it with a conversation, a single seed planted in fertile ground, a doubt introduced to a certainty. Daniel did not know if he had succeeded. He did not know if Zorvan would ever take a different path, but he knew he had tried. That was all anyone could do. When the guards came for him at midday, Daniel stood without resistance. He walked with them through the corridors of the ship, past hundreds of Calathi soldiers who had gathered to watch. He entered the execution chamber with his head held high. And he did not flinch. The execution chamber was round, with tiered seating rising in circles around a central platform. Hundreds of Calathi soldiers filled the seats. Cameras hovered in the air, broadcasting to billions across the empire. The air was thick with anticipation. Daniel walked to the center of the platform. His hands were bound behind his back. His clothes were clean. They had washed him for the cameras. Commander Zorvan stood at the edge of the platform, dressed in ceremonial armor. A blade hung at his side, the traditional weapon of Calathi executioners. It was curved and sharp, designed to sever a head with a single stroke. The crowd fell silent. Zorvan stepped forward. He drew the blade. The metal caught the light, gleaming like fire. "Daniel Reed," Zorvan said, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. "You have been found guilty of crimes against the Dominion, destruction of Dominion property, murder of Dominion soldiers, smuggling contraband to rebel colonies. The sentence is death." Daniel looked at Zorvan. Their eyes met. In that moment, something passed between them that no camera could capture. An understanding, a farewell. Zorvan raised the blade. The crowd held its breath. The blade came down. It cut through the air and sliced through the ropes binding Daniel's hands. The bindings fell to the floor. Daniel stood free on the platform, his arms loose at his sides. Silence. Then chaos. Officers shouted. Soldiers reached for weapons. The cameras continued broadcasting, capturing every moment. Zorvan turned to face his crew. His voice cut through the noise like thunder. "Stand down." "Commander, what are you doing?" His second-in-command pushed through the crowd. "This is treason. High Command will." "High Command will do what High Command always does. They will threaten. They will punish. They will demand obedience." Zorvan sheathed his blade. "I have obeyed for 40 years. I have killed for 40 years. And for what? An empire that grows weaker every day. A people who fear their leaders more than their enemies." He turned back to Daniel. "This human showed me something. He showed me that there is another way. That strength is not the same as cruelty. That power means nothing without purpose." The second-in-command drew his weapon. "I will not allow this. Commander Zorvan, you are hereby relieved of duty. Soldiers, arrest." "Lower your weapon, Tarek." The voice came from the crowd. An old Calathi soldier stood, his scales gray with age. Others stood beside him. Dozens, then hundreds. "We have followed Commander Zorvan into battle for 20 years, the old soldier said. "We have seen what the Empire has become. We are tired of killing, tired of dying for nothing. If the commander says there is another way, we will listen." Tarek looked around the chamber. Half the soldiers had lowered their weapons. The other half were uncertain, looking at each other for guidance. "This is madness," Tarek said. "High Command will send a fleet. They will burn this ship. They will burn all of us." "Then let them come," Zorvan said. But I will not spend another day killing innocent people for an empire that has lost its way. He walked to Daniel and extended one clawed hand. I owe you a debt, human. You showed me what I could become. Now I must show my people. Daniel took the hand. What will you do now? We will go to Haven. We will deliver your cargo, and then we will see what happens next. The next hours were a blur of activity. Zorvan's officers who remained loyal secured the ship. Those who opposed were confined to quarters. Messages were sent to other Calathi commanders, some of whom responded with curiosity, others with hostility. Daniel's freighter was brought into the hangar bay. The medical supplies were intact, the cargo that children needed, the hope that a colony had been waiting for. As the flagship entered orbit around Haven, Daniel stood beside Zorvan on the command deck. The small brown planet hung before them, its surface dotted with farms and settlements. They will not trust us, Zorvan said. The Calathi have been their enemy for years. Trust takes time, but it has to start somewhere. Zorvan looked at Daniel. Why did you believe I would make this choice? When you were sitting in my cell, waiting to die, how did you know? Daniel thought about the question. He thought about all the conversations, all the moments, all the small signs that a change was possible. I did not know, he admitted. I hoped, I believed it was worth trying even if it failed. Sometimes that is all we can do. The first shuttle landed on Haven 2 hours later. Daniel walked down the ramp, followed by Zorvan and a small group of Calathi soldiers. The colonists had gathered to watch, their faces a mixture of fear and disbelief. A young girl broke free from her mother and ran toward Daniel. She stopped a few feet away, looking up at him with wide eyes. Are you the one who brought the medicine? Daniel knelt to her level. Yes, the medicine is here. Your people will be okay now. The girl looked past him at Zorvan. Is he a bad guy? Daniel glanced back at the commander. Zorvan stood stiffly, clearly uncomfortable. He used to be, Daniel said, but he is trying to be better. That is the most any of us can do. The girl considered this. Then she walked past Daniel and stopped in front of Zorvan. She looked up at the massive Calathi commander, her head barely reaching his waist. Thank you for bringing the medicine, she said. Zorvan stared down at her. His scales shifted through several colors before settling on a soft blue that Daniel had never seen before. You are welcome, Zorvan said quietly. The girl smiled and ran back to her mother. Daniel stood and watched as colonists began approaching the shuttle, their fear slowly giving way to cautious hope. Calathi soldiers. Unloaded crates of medicine. Humans and aliens worked side by side for the first time. It was not a perfect moment. There was still anger, still suspicion, still a galaxy full of problems that could not be solved in a single day. But it was a beginning. And sometimes that was enough.